with that, let's just get started. I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. You can start with Sara.
Hi everyone, I'm Sara Saperstein. I'm a lead data scientist at MassMutual. Should we go ahead and just say that, or go ahead and
give a little bit about what you do and what,
So I build a model for underwriting, basically for life insurance. I've been at MassMutual for almost a year and a half now, and before that I worked at an ad tech company, Disability.
Hi, I'm Katie Robbert. I am the CEO and co-founder of Trust Insights. We are a data science consultancy for marketing. I primarily oversee the data science. I myself am not a data scientist. I do a lot of productizing and how to go to market with a lot of the things that we're building. Prior to that, I oversaw a marketing technology team, and I worked in health IT and clinical trials for about a decade before that.
My name is Matt Ritter. I'm on the data science team at AthenaHealth. Specifically, I lead a Scrum team that uses natural language processing to extract prescription information from faxes that we get.
Great. Well, let's start off with the question. So, I'm just going to throw this out and anyone can answer. But in your own words, how would you define machine learning and AI?
Again, not being a data scientist, machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence. And so really the way that we try to describe it, especially in the marketing community, is that it's a lot of math and automation. And really it's helping you to do repetitive things faster and more efficiently, and to find insights that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise find by trying to do all of your computations and analysis manually.
Yeah, I agree with Katie that machine learning is a type of AI. I'm coming from a computational neuroscience background, so to me, AI specifically means that you are replicating the intelligence of some intelligent system. Typically, we think of special abilities that humans might have, or other animals, maybe echolocation like that. And so I do think that the term gets misused. People will take any sort of decision as being AI, whereas, and it's a very hyped word, so I typically use machine learning just to try to calm down some of the hype.
Yeah, so on that topic about AI and the hype and everything that kind of goes with the terminology, AI has been a controversial issue, and some are anxious and fearful of the technology, and they feel that robots may take over the world, while some are optimistic about the opportunities it creates. What's your take on the role of AI, and what are some common misconceptions about machine learning and artificial intelligence?
I think that one common misconception is that AI is going to take over our jobs. And throughout history, we've seen when we have new technologies, it ends up taking away some jobs, typically ones people don't really want to do, and it opens up new jobs that are more interesting, more exciting, and take more thinking, or more interpersonal interaction. So I think that overall it will be a good thing, and there's all this fear. I think that as people get more experience with it, they'll be less fearful. So I've had two instances where I've worked on projects where we were basically taking the expertise of some, a group like a team, and then using that to build our models. One was for setting up automated campaigns, not setting them up, but deciding how much money to put into each of the different types of ad groups on social media. And at first the other one is building this model for underwriting. So in both of these cases, the teams were worried, oh no, this is going to take away our jobs. They didn't like us at first. And we worked with them, they grudgingly told us their secret sauce of how they did what they did so we could build our models. But then as we rolled out the model and they worked with it, they started to see, oh, this is actually really helping me because it's automating the boring stuff and freeing up my time to do the things that I really want to do, like thinking deeply about these problems. It made their lives a lot easier, and so then they really loved our work.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Sara just said. I have a love for machine learning and artificial intelligence because it does automate a lot of those less glamorous tasks, and it's really allowed our very small agency to scale a lot more quickly. We can offer a lot more valuable service by not spending our days like in the weeds creating reports, those types of things. So it's, we talk about there's going to be two jobs in the future. You will either manage the machines or you'll be managed by the machines. And so really taking that step forward to embrace the machine learning and artificial intelligence now, learning what it does, how it can help you, will really just help you like get to that point where you're doing the valuable insights versus doing all of the work in the trenches.
And so I'll extend this into the doom and gloom scenario. So I agree. So everything that they said is true and it's great, and there's going to be a lot of positive outcomes, and potentially even net positive outcomes, probably net positive outcomes. But he likes my confidence. It's like, I'm giving it a strong probably, like between 50 and 60% net positive here. So the thing is that exactly like you're saying, machine learning can change the economics of a number of activities. And it can make things that have always been possible but were not economically feasible. Again, that's often good, but often sometimes for things like facial recognition, something that humans, of course, have done for a long time, something that the police can do. They can review videos and everything when there's a serious crime. They can track someone throughout the city, as we saw with the Boston Marathon bombing. But being able to do it very, very cheaply, 100,000 times more cheaply than employing humans to do it, that changes the game in a fairly qualitative way, not just a quantitative way. So that's how this very same impact that we're talking about can be both positive and negative.
Well, just to add on to that, I personally think that humans are always learning and machine learning and artificial intelligence are always adding upon what has been learned already. How do you think humans and artificial intelligence will kind of work hand in hand? And will there be a time where there will be a greater need for artificial intelligence versus human impact?
So one of my favorite examples of artificial intelligence and humans working hand in hand was for what Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in the 90s, and that was a huge deal. It was one of the first computer victories. And but actually, the very best chess players were what were called centaurs, hybrid human-computer players, where they worked together efficiently. That's no longer the case. I have bad news for all of you. The computer's just straight up with us at this point. And so, but I think that there are some places where humans and computers will continue to work together more effectively than either one alone.
It's an interesting topic that we like to talk about a lot because there's a lot that humans can do that artificial intelligence won't be able to do for a very long time. And that's more of the emotional things, the empathy, the sympathy, and even just sort of understanding sarcasm and tone. We were doing an analysis on sentiment on like Instagram posts, for example. And people will post something sarcastic like it's a beautiful picture of a beach and they have beautiful chocolate drinks and they'll say this sucks. And so the computer will start to understand that as, oh, well, that's a negative thing. And so, there's a lot that artificial intelligence still needs to learn from humans because we're very complex people despite us wanting to just be very simple. And so I think that that's where you're still going to need both and, we'll be learning from each other for a very, very long time, I hope.
Yeah, all the systems that I've worked on have had a human in the loop component, and I think it just works way better that way. It's an interesting example about the chess. I didn't realize that now the computer was totally beating
that was
chess
a tough day.
Expert. Yeah. Maybe that does give us an idea of the direction that things are going. If you just automate these things and not have to keep them in the loop, in 100 years or something.
Well, to shift gears a little bit, I think we were coming upon this, but when it comes to AI and machine learning, a lot of questions come when it comes to ethics. So can you tell us about an important ethics or other issue in AI that you've run into in your work?
Yeah, doing underwriting, we have a lot of these kinds of cases, as you can imagine, or a lot of these considerations. As you can imagine, life insurance has historically been a means for kind of wealth accrual. among populations, and so we have to be really careful. And life insurance has a not so sacred history on this too. So we take it very seriously at MassMutual. We go to fairness and transparency conferences, and we have an outside team that reviews our models and then tells us, oh, these features are, even though they're not directly related to protected features, they're leading through some of that information. I think that where ethics really comes into play is kind of, for our work, there's three kind of parts. One is kind of a simple, like how are you, not simple, but how are you storing your data? How are you making sure to protect people's privacy? Because they're giving you their medical data, they're giving you their financial data. It's just a lot of really sensitive information, and you have to make sure that the people who can see it are really limited and that you're protecting it from privacy breaches. Then there's also on the algorithm side, the weapons of math destruction type of, where you have to make sure that you're not, your models aren't biased, but also that you're not perpetuating bias. One example there is, so medically, if you have a lower BMI, like a really low BMI, your mortality risk is higher, typically. But there are some people who just, through their genetic makeup, they just have a smaller build. And our model, we were looking at a case where our model was penalizing someone that we believed was otherwise healthy and just had a naturally small build. And this really concerned us because if by having that in our model gets those people with smaller builds, but just naturally so, to go to other companies, we are missing that data now in our training set, and then our model will continue to believe that small build is unhealthy. So, we reviewed it with the team and, found out that actually the model was doing a better job of preventing that than the human underwriters. So we were in the right direction. And we talked about ways that we might be able to mitigate that going forward. And it's interesting too, because this is the kind of case where, I think genetic data for underwriting is maybe a sensitive topic. And this is a case where it would actually really benefit people if you could say like, oh, well, we can see from your genetic makeup that this BMI is a really healthy one for you or something. So the protection of the data, your algorithms, making sure you're not perpetuating any bias. And I'm not remembering what the third one is right now. So I'll pass it on.
Excuse me.
Yes.
For some reason, that mic doesn't come out of the speaker on the side. Your mic comes out of
Mine does? Okay.
Yours is there, but that one's not.
Let's switch that up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Make sure that that's working for somebody else.
We were talking about this a little bit before the panel started, and I'm a little bit in a luxurious position where I'm not dealing with any sensitive data. The marketing data is mostly what comes out of Google Analytics or other systems like that. There's no identifying information. But one of the things that we do is we use machine learning algorithms to identify social media influencers, Instagram influencers. And one of the questions that we've started asking our clients is are the results diverse enough? Is it what you're looking for? Is there too much bias? When you're looking for influencers for the next fashion thing or food thing, whatever the thing is that you want those influencers for, is it a diverse group? And that's a question that we're really challenging people to think about when they're going after, well, I just want a Kardashian, or I just want the person who's going to get the most reach. Is that the most representative to your brand, or do you just want the person who's going to get the most likes? And so we're really trying to challenge them when we're building those algorithms out and trying to ask them to really think through, is that really what you need? To start to prevent some of that bias that we are seeing that just comes out of the same software over and over and over again. We're trying very slowly but surely to combat a little bit of that.
Great. So our next question. What is a recent trend about AI that you find interesting or important?
One of my pet things that my coworkers are probably annoyed about is active learning. I really think that there's so much data in this world, but we need even more of it. And active learning is what helps guide the active collection of data. So the data collection is actually in the loop. And I found time and again that when we start a project, we have almost exactly what we need. And the successful projects are the ones where we can make a little logical leap and make it work. And then, of course, we test it in production and we really are sure that it works. But there's so many where it's painful. We're within visual distance of exactly what we need, but we just don't have it because it didn't happen to be what made operational sense when the application was originally developed. And so I think, again, active learning is where you can deploy effortful information gathering, often with a human, to build out that data set and build it really efficiently. So it doesn't need to be, 10 million lines. It can be 1 million or something. Still expensive, but in many cases worth it.
So one trend that I'm really excited about is this big push towards transparency and fairness. Because there's a lot of models that we can build, and I think that we all need to take that step back and say, but should we? Should we build a model to predict someone's criminality based on their photo? No, we really shouldn't. And so, I think that this gets back to what we were talking about earlier with the dangers of AI. I think that the dangers are ourselves. And what we do with it. And so I'm just so excited to see that people are really caring about this and wanting to make sure that the models that we build are for good and not for evil.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think when it comes to AI and what people are most scared of is that everything's just an breach. People are going to find out personal information that they don't want out there. And a lot of the times I don't think people really trust a machine where a human can do it. So I think another question I have is, do you think there will be a point, and I think we touched a little bit on this already, in which artificial intelligence will be able to actually understand human emotion? Do you think we'll ever get close to that? And is that where we want to go with that?
I would like to believe no. And I say that I very briefly studied psychology. I have a working understanding of how complex the human brain is and emotions and the nuance. It goes beyond. I think that artificial intelligence will be able to understand and replicate basic emotions, anger, sadness, fear. But when you really start to get into those nuances, when someone immediately has an instant attraction, or if something sort of rubs them the wrong way and they're kind of in a bad mood for the rest of the day, those are the types of things that I think artificial intelligence will have a more difficult time replicating. I can't think of a use case as to why you want that, but if you're trying to find, companionship. There's been, I think movies have sort of ruined the idea of what artificial intelligence is really meant to do. Ex Machina, great movie, but it's a little scary. But I think that that's sort of the idea of what they want artificial intelligence to be able to do. I think we would struggle to get there to really get it right, and it looks different for everybody, and it's not a critical thinking, X plus Y equals Z, that's a decision that machine can make. It's more nuanced than that. So I would venture to say no. Flat out no. And I'm probably wrong, but I would like to think that no.
Yeah, I think your point is spot on. If you think about the complexity of the human brain, all of the chemical reactions that are going on, all the connections between different neurons, and the different ways that you can dictate those relationships between those neurons. And then you think about how long it takes us to learn to be a person. It takes us so many years just to learn to babble and say words, let alone be able to detect sarcasm, which I still can't do. So, sure, we could put all of our resources on it. It could be our, going to the moon times 100 or something. We could maybe get it done, but again, why? Do we want to?
So I first want to assure you that my friends consider me a very optimistic person. I think that everything that you're saying is absolutely right, that deeply understanding human emotion is really, really difficult. I think we are certainly not good at deeply understanding each other, and often not even good at deeply understanding ourselves, right? I think we've all been surprised at the intensity of our reaction at one point in our lives. But I guess I might recast the question slightly to, can it do it well enough to cause problems? And the answer to that is certainly yes, because I think that even before artificial intelligence, we've built machines that can manipulate people's emotions. And I think an underappreciated machine, and by underappreciated in this context, I of course mean underfeared, is slot machines. Slot machines are terrifying. They suck money out of people. You can stand and see it happen, and then they come back the next day and do it again. And I don't know exactly how they work psychologically, but clearly, for a subset of people, but not a small subset, they have really pushed all the buttons. And I would argue maybe they don't understand the emotion, they're not trying to, but the design has managed to manipulate emotions anyway. And I think with even marginal intelligence, maybe a greater portion of people could be sucked in a similar way.
I think Katie made a really good one. I hope it gets to a point where it understands us enough, but I think not having AI not necessarily have the emotional capacity of a human being just makes sure that we're still in the picture.
Right.
So I'm definitely in the same position as you there. So each of you work in different industries and have worked with AI and machine learning in different capacities. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how you think AI will continue to change in your industry and how it will change what you do and what other people do?
I can start. Specifically in the marketing space, there's still a lot of there's a large segment of marketers who still don't know what to do with the data that they have, let alone outside sources of data. So one of the ways that we're seeing machine learning and artificial intelligence really help marketers do their jobs better is make sense of data that comes from a lot of different sources. So you have your social, your web analytics, your CRM, your marketing automation. They try to measure everything, which is great, but you can't do something with all of that data. So we've been able to do driver analysis, predictive forecasting, text mining, sentiment analysis, all of those things using machine learning algorithms to help them understand what's really important that they really need to be paying attention to. So in terms of the marketing space, we really see that it's sort of the newer shiny thing, but it's becoming more, this isn't so scary. I can use it in my day-to-day, and I can make better decisions about what I'm going to be doing with my marketing and where I'm going to be spending my money.
Great, I can be optimistic here. So I work in healthcare. Healthcare, of course, is a giant space. So when you think of healthcare and AI, you probably think of robo-doctors, right? Ones that are doing automated diagnosis, and that is very exciting. And but I think that it's easy to get fixated on that and lose track of the many, many, many other problems of healthcare besides inaccurate diagnosis. Many of them are operational. And what's nice about that is that everybody is losing right now. We all get angry at insurance companies. We all get angry at how long it can take for things to happen. No one wants it to take that long. That's more work on everyone's side. And if we can, and we are, actively building out systems that can do those exchanges much more fluidly, the same things will happen, but faster and with less cost, and everyone wins to some degree.
Yeah, so in life insurance, I guess in a sense we're lucky to have a long history of rigorous statistics. So it's been sort of doing, data science type things for a long time. But then as life insurance industries are starting to incorporate more people who are trained in data science, these, it's better. In particular, so I work on life underwriting. So my goal is I'd really like people to live longer than they think they will. And I would like for us to be good at predicting how long people will live, but more on the side of getting people to live longer. So as we get more data, as we see kind of what correlates to that, we might be able to, working with kind of medical teams, have a better sense of what will help people to live longer. Some companies are using Fitbit data, for example. So it used to be that, they would, right now you get a bunch of blood work done to see kind of how your medical picture looks. But what if you are trying to improve your health, you're getting your steps, and you have a better risk than what it looks like based on your high cholesterol levels? We want to reward that kind of healthy behavior because we want to help people to live longer. So I think that there could be some interactions with our customers to help tell them kind of what's working and what's important to do to live a long, happy life. And there's also this idea that, we have to group people together into these risk classes, and as a policyholder, you would want to be grouped with people in a fair way. You want to make sure that you are with people who are taking care of themselves just as much as you are, going to live long. And so, getting better at discerning that risk so that we're going at the key features, the actual positive factors of your health, rather than, stuff that have just kind of historically been associated with it, I think would be really great for everyone with policy.
This definitely touches base a little bit. So I'm a marketing student in marketing. I'm a marketing grad student currently, and I'm reading a book about predictive analytics, and I think we've definitely talked a lot about that on this panel so far, about how machine learning and artificial intelligence kind of just helps predict basically things that we as humans can't see yet, but it might be able to kind of notice different trends. So in addition to kind of predictive analytics and that aspect, what do you think is a new use case for AI that you think is significant and has potential to grow?
I'm not sure if this exactly answers your question, but I'm really excited about self-driving cars. I'm sort of anti-car myself, so I'm not sure why I like this, but I imagine that once we have more self-driving cars, maybe it no longer is a thing for people in cities to own a car, and then maybe we get a little bit away from this dependency on cars. So I think there's a lot of those kinds of unforeseen consequences of these, AI that might come about to just give us, free us up from that kind of stuff, the boring stuff, or get us, no longer dependent on owning cars, and free up our time for other things.
I think that there's a lot of potential for systems that enable you to navigate and negotiate marketplaces more efficiently. So this is something that I've thought about off and on for a long time, but never actually put into words before, so bear with me. But I think that a lot of the reasons that we do things that we do in this capitalist system is because we are so cognitively limited. Right? So why does 9.99 work? Everyone knows what that means, but and so if we actually had systems that were weighing prices, but also thinking about the benefits that you're looking for and things like that, that really understood you. I just bought a plane ticket, and it was better than terrible, but I'm not a terribly unusual person in terms of what I'm looking for. But it is multi-factor, right? It's not just the lowest price, and so but I still found myself sort of cross-referencing, FAA reports about how often different airlines are late and stuff like that. And so nothing about that is conceptually complex. It's just the data is spread all around. That's something that can be very easily automated. I wouldn't even elevate it to artificial intelligence. It's just sort of bringing data together. So I think that that's fairly small ball. It could go all the way up to buying cars for thousands of dollars, buying homes for godly numbers of dollars, and all the way up and down the scale. And I think that not only would it save you a few minutes here and there, but it would eventually allow pricing, which is kind of the market signal that we're counting on to move our economy, to be much more rational than the really obvious kind of discontinuities that we see, 9.99, 1999, etc.
It's not a new use case, but one of the, in the past few years, the more recent, is this idea of these smart assistants. I mean, everybody has them on their phone, everybody has them in their house now. And I really think that it's changed the way that we schedule ourselves or we do our daily tasks. We get so used to now just yelling at a machine. There's a funny story with my business partner who's a data scientist. We were sitting waiting for a client meeting, and I asked him a question, and he started responding to me as if I was the smart assistant. He's like, okay, so here's what you want to say. Katie, space, new line. And I was like, I'm literally right here. I think, while it's not a new and upcoming thing, I think just more of it, the normalization of artificial intelligence in our everyday lives, making it more accessible to people, taking the mystery out of it, just making it something that you can literally just grab off the shelf and, okay, now I'm using artificial intelligence and it's not scary. I think that's really what I'm excited about.
So I'm going to go back a little bit to the fear. I don't know. This is just something that I think everyone's very interested in. I've noticed, and when I'm out with friends or if I'm talking to someone in the room and either Siri or Alexa's listening, that sometimes I'll see an ad for, like, I'm planning a trip to Denver in July, and I recently saw an ad that came up on my phone right after I had talked about it with someone. So in terms of that, do you think there's a point in which where AI, there's a line that needs to be drawn with how much data is known? And if so, what is that line, and how much should be artificial intelligence versus humans actually kind of controlling what data that they have?
I will say first that I think statistics can help us with this kind of
Okay.
example. So maybe the airlines are pushing Denver for some reason. They're not getting enough flights. They want to encourage more there. So you might have seen something previously that suggested Denver, and I'm not saying this is indefinitely your case, but I think this happens a lot. So it kind of primes you and you don't know about it, and then you're like, oh, I should go to Denver. And then when there's an ad for it, then you notice it because you've been thinking about it. Whereas if you had been talking about going to Denver and then you saw an ad for San Jose, you wouldn't even register it. So there's this cognitive bias there, this confirmation bias, to pick up on those things. So I think that we see that when sometimes that's not really what's happening. Although, I don't know, like some of these, they might be listening. I feel like my Alexa does not listen to me, so Google does a little better. But yeah, so I think that it's important for us to think about what are the cognitive biases or what are the ways that we could be fooled in this like assessment of how are the algorithms working. And I think that a lot of this comes with the fear, educating ourselves, like you're doing the coming to GA events, see if you guys plug. I think that educating yourself on how these things work will help you be better at discerning what's going on in the algorithm, or anything you see online. And then there was the latter part of your question.
I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm sorry. I was saying how or where do you think the line is drawn?
Oh, where the line's drawn, yeah. I think that a lot of that comes down to being very transparent, like aggressively transparent about what your model's doing, what data's getting used, and how. In my own work, it's been recommended to me that I don't share how the sausage is made with our stakeholders. Because, it'll scare them, they won't understand it, and I have found that to not be the case at all. Like, I love explaining and geeking out about how our models are working. I think everyone's very intelligent, they can understand it just fine, and they appreciate understanding how it works so that when something goes wrong, they can help, they can debug it themselves, or they can tell us, this is what's going on. That empowers them to use it. And I think we need to do that for the general public as well, for the algorithms that we interact with on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, you absolutely made the right point. It's that education piece of it and the transparency. And so I think it's a shared responsibility between the companies who are building these algorithms and the people who are purchasing them. And so, there is some level of transparency. I mean, who really takes the time to read a privacy policy or terms of use? A lot of the information is in there. So the onus is on the people who are using these systems to actually read these things and understand and challenge the companies to say, I don't have enough information, I can't buy your software or I can't buy your product. And then understanding how to change the settings on your Alexa or your Siri so that it's not listening all the time. So I think that there's sort of that shared responsibility that's just not happening. A lot of people just plug in the Alexa like, cool, it can tell me a bunch of dad jokes all day, which is how I use mine. But I need to also be aware of how it's listening. I think Subway recently came out with a campaign, commercials, and they're owning it. They're really sort of like, okay, the AI is always listening. How did it know I wanted something spicy and salty? And then Alexa just kind of blinks. Like, they're owning it. They're letting you know that this is how it works. And I thought it was just so genius because it normalizes it. but you have to educate yourself on how these work and how you as a consumer can protect yourself and your own privacy.
Totally agree, and I'd just say, each new technology, there's sort of a panic when it first comes out, and it's not unreasonable. Without the panic, people would be taken advantage of, but eventually, hopefully, with constant work on individuals, governments, the whole spectrum, we find a balance.
We need to find something we disagree on.
Well, we all agree with what has been said, so we'll see if we can find anything. But thank you for that. I think I'm less afraid now. So looking forward and pre-optimistic, how can we individually and collectively prepare for the future of work with AI playing a role?
Be curious, ask questions. I think that sort of, I know I've said I'm not a data scientist, but I'm perpetually asking questions. I'm not shy about asking questions. How does that work? What does that do? Why did it do that? What is that output? And really just trying to understand what's happening. But you have to have that motivation. You have to want to know more. You're going to find, again, sort of back to that idea of there will be two jobs. Either you manage the machines or the machines will be managed by you. It's going to come down to that, self-motivation of you want to learn more. You want to at least be able to ask questions. What does the thing do versus just being complacent and, okay, well, the machine will do that for me. Cool. Well, you're out of a job, so there you are. That's how that's going to work. Okay, that's not less optimistic.
This is getting interesting. Well, I think that there are absolutely things you can do, and one thing to keep in mind is none of this is instant. I think probably everyone in this room has tried to build something of one type or another, and have been many of you programming something given that we're General Assembly, and it always takes longer than you think, right?
Yeah.
So this will happen, but it won't be like you woke up tomorrow and you should have been studying all night. I would say that regardless of your role, another thing that I think is important is that data science is going to be important, but data scientists, it's not like everyone's going to be a data scientist, right? Many people are going to be marketers for companies that have nothing to do with data, but use it to make some of their processes efficient. And I think that the right way to prepare for that role is to play around a little bit, dramatically overfit a model just to deeply understand what that means. And use some garbage in, garbage out data to understand what that means. And just get to the point where when someone awesome like Sara comes to you and tells you how the model works, you have played around with it enough, just a few hours, so that you really can understand about this actual business situation.
Yeah, exactly. And you can consume stories about ways that models can go wrong. So one of my favorite stories, which I said before, is University of Washington built so first I should say their mascot is a husky. And so they decided to build a wolf detector, like wolf versus husky discriminator. And so they had all these pictures of huskies and all these pictures of wolves. They trained the model, and it did really well. And they're like, "Oh, this is great. We have this wolf detector." But then they're like, "Okay, well, we should understand how the model's working." So they look at what pixels are most. You can't get into some of those higher order things that easily. You can at least say, okay, on the pixel level, which ones are the most predictive? And they found that it was where there was snow. Because it turned out the pictures of husky were not in snow, and the pictures of wolves were. So they actually built a snow detector. Learn about those kinds of stories so that you can have that critical eye of, okay, this model is predicting this, but what other things could it be picking up on?
So in addition to how we individually and collectively can prepare for that, how do you think companies and startups in Boston, with the companies that you guys are part of, are leveraging AI in their products and services?
How
other companies in Boston are leveraging? If anyone has any ideas.
if someone wants to tell me what you're doing, I'm all ears. No, it's interesting. I think that a lot of people are trying to understand it better, how they can, they might be starting smaller with something like a robotic process automation to try to automate some of their tasks. I think a lot of companies and startups are trying to start to dip their toes in it. I don't have any hard data to say that that's what's happening, but when we go to other conferences, That's what we're seeing people talk about more because they want to be able to scale. They can't add headcount, but they need to be able to do more work. So how do you get there? Okay, machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence. So I think it's going to become more standard. I think as companies like Watson, they don't have all of their stuff straight out of the box yet, but it's becoming more drag and drop, more accessible for companies to use. I think that it will become easier for companies, especially startups, to start to say, okay, we can build on a foundation of machine learning and not have to add a lot more people right away.
All right, we might have found something we can disagree on. And I say this because I disagree with myself on it, so that's a good start at least. And so you asked how companies can use this, and I think there's a big build versus buy thing. This isn't unique to AI, but it's got its own flavor. So you mentioned Watson, and of course Amazon pushes some of its own kind of black box services, and there's entire startup companies that will basically suck out your data, do their model, and then at any point you can send them unlabeled data, and they'll send you back a label. And you never get access to the model, you just pay them per ping. Or do you hire people, you do both, or maybe you hire contractors kind of in between. I would be very curious if either of you have strong opinions about the best way to do that, or how you make the decision on a case-by-case basis.
What the build or buy?
Build versus buy.
So, interestingly, we do actually talk about that a lot with our clients. We are on the side of building ourselves because we haven't found a lot of great off-the-shelf products that you can do predictive modeling within marketing for Google Trends data, for example, for search data, for social media data. So we're on the side of building it ourselves with the hope that we can sort of productize it to help people buy it. Because we get asked that question a lot at conferences, and our clients say, well, can I just buy something off the shelf? Well, no, you can hire us, and we can build it for you very custom because everybody wants something different. We haven't yet cracked the code on that standard thing that works for everybody. So I'm on the side of build, but that's because it pays my money.
I think if your option of buying is that there's another team of people who are using these tools and thinking deeply about the data, then that is just kind of like you do your spreadsheets to see what makes the most sense for your company and long-term growth. If your solution to buy is to have an automated system where you're just feeding in data and there's not anyone who's thinking deeply about the data and how it's being used and how it's being, features that are being generated, I think that you're going to get a garbage in, garbage out sort of situation. I worry about this with some of the automation for data science because running a model is easy, but knowing which model to run, knowing how to handle the data before it goes into the model, knowing what considerations that you need to have, that's where the science comes into play. And I do think that you need at least some data professionals on your team who are doing that deep thinking about the data, trying to understand, where could there be hidden bias that we're not considering? What are the, special considerations for this form of data that we need to use for modeling? That ends up being really important. So I don't know if, I agree with Katie that it's becoming more standard to have data science. And I'm biased from, organizing the Boston data science meetup. I see a lot of companies that are using data science very integral to their business. So I don't know too much about, it's a bias there. I don't know who's not using data science. But it does appear that in the industries that I've been in, that it's becoming more and more standard to have that. And then, just making sure that companies are hiring the full teams they need to get the work done rather than trying to do these shortcuts and then having garbage models.
I think I'm on the fence about buying those. I think if the models work well and have shown kind of success rates within a certain industry, then buying might be good. But there's also the benefit of building your own models, since if you are looking for specific data and you want to use artificial intelligence for something specific that only you have, that no one else has done, then building is probably your best bet with that. So I'm pro both.
Can I caveat to that?
Yeah.
So you were bringing up a really good point about understanding the model itself. And so on the side of build, as you were making me think, so I would caveat my answer of, yes, I'm always on the side of build, but if you are going to buy, you do have to have the right staff and people to even understand what the thing is doing. And where we see a lot of companies and clients go wrong is they'll buy something off the shelf and say, well, this will work, I can just do this, and they'll plug it in, turn it on, and then it doesn't do the thing that they want it to do because they don't understand how to use it. So you're absolutely right. You made a really good point. I just wanted to agree with her.
I agree too.
Well, I guess we're all in agreement, yeah. But definitely with investment, when it comes to models and building and buying, the team behind it is definitely what's most important. I think a lot of companies may buy a product and not necessarily have the infrastructure within, or have not actually invested their time in training employees or getting the right employees to actually help build upon that data. So I definitely think that is, if not one of the most important aspects of that all. So I think we have time for 2 more questions. So what's your recommendation for anyone interested in getting into the field of machine learning and AI, and what's something you wish you had known before entering?
I wish I had known that my film degree would not be useful in my career. It's not. I would say start looking at blogs, articles. There's a lot of really good open source information. RStudio is a great place to start. If you want to learn how to code or understand, SQL is a really great place to start as well. There's a lot of free resources available for people who are just generally interested in testing the waters. So again, I would go back to be curious. That's how you start, and that's how you're going to continue to be successful in any career. But data science, it's difficult. It's not overnight, as you said. You have to really be motivated. You have to really kind of want it.
I would say learn the fundamentals. There's a lot of math behind it. Take those classes. If you can, take a degree program in data science. Now that they have those, I think that's awesome. What I wish I had known is that you don't have to waste your 20s in a grad program, like in a PhD program. The people I know who went straight into a master's and then straight into work, I think that they did the right thing. Just as long as the program that you are in really does cover those fundamentals, because there's the tools and there's understanding how those tools are used, but then there's understanding kind of the math and the computation that goes on behind them.
And something that I'd say that I'm 90% sure is true is that you should learn a domain. So we talk about data science, and that's actually a little bit ridiculous, right? There's lots of sciences, and they all use data. And so, as you're sort of alluding to, many people get into data science by studying a specific science, a physical science, getting really good at processing that data, and then realizing that data in whatever else is sufficiently similar. But you might as well jump right into healthcare. You might as well jump right into XYZ. Because the data is somewhat different, not impossibly different, but the natural language processing is the words that doctors write are not natural language. And so it is, although the techniques are broadly the same, it is a different problem. And if you're interested in marketing, you're probably going to have much more data, right? Because there's so many events that are relevant to marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can find a field that you're interested in, that will really help accelerate you to learn the right things for your direction.
I disagree.
Love it.
This is great.
I don't think that you need to know a particular discipline, a particular industry. I think that diving deeply into one so that you really understand kind of the ins and outs of something is good. But what I find I really love about data science is that I can go from working in ad tech, or even before that, working in computational neuroscience, then working in ad tech, and then now in life insurance. I'm interested in so many different things, and these tools can apply across a range of different fields, depending on the type of data, the type of problems. I think that you don't necessarily need to be a domain expert. You gain that domain expertise, but I think that you can take those tools and apply them to a lot of different things.
Just a small GA plug, we do offer data science offerings and data analytics classes here, so if anyone's interested, hi. So just to round this all off, is there anything left that you guys would like to say about AI and machine learning that would help? Any ending remarks? Yeah, go.
If your model's accuracy is 100%, you probably overfit.
I think we're good there.
Yeah.
I would even go lower, as an example, I'm seeing 95 on my data today, and I'm like, this isn't right.
So with that, I'm going to open the floor to the audience for questions. So does anyone have any questions? Yes, please.
With what's happened in Europe with GDPR requiring model interpretability and California's privacy legislation likely doing the same, how are your companies starting to try and stay ahead of legislators who are legislating AI, even though they don't even understand how the internet works?
Yeah, we already are, that's already been a huge thing on our minds, given the type of data that we have. And, we're in a very tightly regulated industry, but we want to make sure that we are even doing better than that. So in life insurance, New York recently came out with really strict requirements on interpretability. It's just always top of mind for us. So I think that because we're not commerce, it's a little different for us. In that case, it's more about explaining to people like why they got the risk class that they got, what particular health factors made a difference. And then as far as having that data, just really, we have a very large staff of people who are working to make sure that the data is private and protected.
So we do work a lot in commerce data, a lot in data collection of people's behaviors on the web. And so we're fortunate in the sense that a lot of these systems, such as Google Analytics and a lot of the like HubSpot, built in those settings as they knew GDPR was coming. And so we make sure that our company is compliant with what we do with the GDPR regulations. And then when we work with other clients, we try our best to do the same. That's their decision, however they want to monitor their own data. But we always try to lean towards, okay, here are the best practices. Even if it's not affecting you at the moment, it will at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of the difference too, is that with having your data collected and you may not know about it, although you brought up such a great point earlier about taking that initiative on ourselves to go through our Facebook privacy settings and really see what's there and all of these devices. But having data that's like kind of we're passive as it's getting collected versus data that you are giving the company.
Yep.
So like in the life insurance space, you're filling out an application and you're like, what this data is going towards. It's going towards, underwriting your policy. So I guess we have a little bit in that sense that it's like upfront it's already really clear what is it used for.
Anyone else have a question? Okay.
So one of the, not criticisms of AI, but observations has been that most AI machine learning tends to be narrowly focused. And I was wondering about your opinions on how that kind of shapes the development of your industries. And for instance, there's a critique of healthcare where we're still just treating sick people, where there's all this data that could be probably used to push like wellness and preventative care a whole lot more effectively, and then drive down healthcare costs. And, I know, healthcare and life insurance tend to overlap, but the market is probably another way.
Great point. I would say there's two interrelated issues. As you noted, healthcare has had a problem with kind of its overfocus for well before data science was a thing. That has a lot to do with payment structures. So, as you probably all know, doctors get paid to treat sick people, not to keep people well, which seems sort of like just being silly to draw that distinction, but it makes a huge difference. There is legislation and there are active programs that try to do the opposite. So you get paid a certain amount per patient. And if it costs more, you, the doctor, to treat them, you have to eat that cost. So you suddenly become very interested in keeping them well. And of course, that, strictly speaking, has nothing to do with data, but they start to get very interested in how they can use data to get people well. So that sort of changed the business model, changed the regulation, those sorts of things. From a data perspective, one of the other contenders for technologies that I think are very exciting in the forefront is called transfer learning. And that's training sort of these general systems that can then do just a little bit of extra training to do some specific thing or another. And they've had some success with video games, obviously very different, but it's sort of this concept that, a human baby, once they're old enough to throw a red ball, they can throw a blue ball pretty much instantly, or even a blue foam block or something like that. And so I'm trying to get machines to be a little bit more like that.
So ironically, and that it does make sense to anybody in this room, but marketers are really bad at collecting data, like horrible at it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to work on is getting better data collection so that we can get the marketers out of this reactive only space. We have a hard time getting people to understand what even happened before we can even introduce AI to what could happen. And so that's, unfortunately, in our industry, that's kind of where we're stuck, is getting better data collection so that you can even apply some of these more advanced technologies, which is the term. That's where we are.
I think it's a really fascinating question. There's sort of a trade-off, in a sense, between your privacy and having these sort of other features. So, for example, in the advertising space, if you want if the advertising to be targeted to exactly the things that you want to know about, you have to give that information, or you have to allow it to have that information to know about where you spend your time, where you go, what things are you interested in. And I think that we need to think about kind of where that balance is, or set up systems. I think this might be a better approach. Set up systems where it's really clear what you're sharing and how, and you have that control over it, so you can kind of tweak those levers of how much you want it tailored. We have that now to some degree by these hidden privacy policies that if you dig deep enough, you can go in and change your privacy settings. But I think culturally we sort of need to decide where we fall on that. I think that the US, typically, we're more okay with using some privacy in order to get more tailored, recommendations, or, like with healthcare, that's all very protected. We would have to open that up more in order to build these kinds of tools. But yeah, I think it's such a rich category of avenue of thinking, and we need to kind of have those kind of hard thoughts about what do we want, how can we set up systems where people have some control over it for themselves, opt in or not.
Any other questions? Yes.
Wondering about any sort of recent developments that have made your work easier in terms of machine learning development. I'll try to give an example. So in our company, we develop some models, and for a long time we've had to tune them to different hyperparameters. Then we got this tool that let us just train a whole array of different hyperparameter settings. And, that, keeping with the marketing example, eliminated a lot of our day-to-day work, made lives easier. So is there anything you guys have seen accelerating this week?
So it's I'll start with the bad news, which is that it was an internal-only tool, but but it can be an inspiration because I think it's pretty doable. We made something called the Model Performance Tracker, which is simply once you start training more than 5, 6, 7 models, you begin to lose track of which one was the good one. And so this system, automatically plots the performance of all models against each other, a whole bunch of kind of sub-performance indicators if you want to choose not the best by your overall accuracy or something like that, but something that does well in some subset that's interesting. So that's something that I looked around for a while, couldn't find a good open source or even paid option for, and so our life has been much better as we roll around.
We were able to develop a model that, using driver analysis methodology, we had a client who had all their data sort of spread out everywhere. They had no idea what was happening, and they were charged with understanding what was working on social media. So we were able to bring in all of these different data sets, about 1,000 or so variables, and what they thought was working was actually not. It was really sort of the size of their audience that they're posting. And so really being able to use those models to develop deeper insights into things that we sort of take for granted, like what works on Twitter. We were able to really do a more sophisticated analysis for them so that they could understand that it's not the number of hashtags, but it's actually the length of the post that's working or the time of day, but really they're focusing on, the emojis that they use. Like it's those very basic things that we're able to apply those models to that make their life easier in the long run. So then once we've developed it, we can keep running it as they collect more data and as people's behaviors change.
Yeah, it's a lot of little things like the internal tools that we make or development of open source tools that become available or people can try. But in kind of a different perspective, I'm really excited about this recent kind of explosion of data engineering. So I think typically data scientists have, within the last few years, they've done kind of this, data ingestion and then they build a model and then they work to deploy it. But for me, the fun part is the thinking about the data and building the model. And I don't really want to worry about ingesting the data, and I don't want to worry so much about deployment or some of the, nitty-gritty of that. And so having data engineering teams to support that, I guess starting to specialize in different roles of data science. I've really liked that. I think it then allows people to become more efficient because they get to specialize. There's so many, I guess really what it comes down to is there's so much to know in each of those different parts. Staying on top of it, staying on top of what the latest tools are that make your life easier, it becomes so difficult if you have to do it for the whole, nose to tail. So having that specialization has been really lovely.
So there's been a lot of development with H2O's AutoML, Google AutoML, Watson's AutoAI from IBM. These tools promise to do feature engineering, automated one-hot encoding stuff, and then spit out, run the bench test. Like here's the 70 models and the 15 variations of XGBoost that we've done. What's your perspective on? Are these good things? Are these bad things? Or are they shortcuts that without a trained data science team, you're just going to kind of say, well, I put it into IBM's Watson and Watson's always right. So we'll just go with whatever Watson tells us to do, even because you have no ability to look at like the R squared and go, that's like 5 million. That's clearly not right.
Yeah, this goes back to a little bit what we talked about earlier, where if you don't have people who know what they're doing, then yeah, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. I think that having these kind of tools that make it easier, like I don't want to spend all my time messing around with setting up the training and test set. Like I can have a command that just does that, and sets up my cross-validation folds really easily, does my one-hot coding for me. Like if it's just super easy, that frees me up for doing the thinking about data.
Agreed. No, but we work within Watson a lot, and one of the things that Watson can start to do is pick the algorithm for you based on the output that you're looking for. And I think that getting that assistance from the software is going to be really helpful. You can't bypass, you can't shortcut and say, okay, that's it, that's what it says, that's the answer. You really still have to challenge it and say, is that the answer? Like, is it really 100%, 95%? Probably not. It'd be amazing if it was.
So I think that the rate at which we're completing valuable data science projects is like the rate at which I could suck water out of a pool with a straw. And so like this sounds like a bigger, like a what's it called? A bigger straw. And that's great. I don't know. Like I think that there's still plenty to do, and any friction you remove from one part of the system will increase the flow until the friction in another part of the system is painful, and then that'll be my job. And
Any other questions from the audience that we have? Let's start here.
Maybe a follow-up on that question. That's what I usually ask. What do you focus on when these things like a AutoML? So if I'm a master's student in data science, I'm about to go out into the workforce, doing these basic things that AutoML can solve for me, probably not what I should focus on. What would you suggest the next step focus?
I would say thinking deeply about data. I don't know if that's kind of the answer for the type of answer you're looking for. I think there's no substitute for spending time with your data, doing a pair plot, understanding how the different variables are interacting with each other, questioning the assumptions that you're making about the data. I think there's just no substitute for that, and I know that when I'm hiring data scientists, having that deep thinking, having that curiosity that Pete was mentioning earlier, those are the traits that I look for. You can learn the tools, maybe this set of tools, but this, our shop uses this other set of tools, you can learn that. It's so easy to run these kinds of tools now that the hard part, the new friction point, although I'd say maybe it's always been a friction point, is being able to understand, knowing how to understand data deeply and caring enough to really look into it.
Unsurprisingly, I agree. No, and you're absolutely right. While these tools are taking away some of the things that will take you hours to do and it can do it in minutes, you still have to understand the data that's going in. You have to understand what it is that you want to come out. I mean, really what it's doing is to take away some of the processing time. The putting the variables together, transforming them, spitting them out into a different form. That's really what it's doing for you. But you still need to understand which algorithm did it pick and why did it pick that one, or what happened to that variable that suddenly disappeared and I thought it was important. So, you're absolutely right. I'm really just saying what you're saying.
So I'll take the pessimistic view. Everything they said is true. I will add on, though. I'll add another additional perspective, which is what they're talking about is sort of the highest conceptual level stuff that AI in almost any domain can't really do, and that's fantastic. That will be the case for a long time. There's also this really low-level nitty-gritty stuff, a lot of it that will be specific to the organization that you are working with. That there's not going to be an open source tool for dealing with your organization's stupid database and how it needs to connect with the, Watson for this, but then because some other department wants to use AWS, then you have to ship half of Watson to AWS and force them together. And so each organization's kind of a different thing. And I guess I had this moment where I was sitting with our architect, our data science architect, and kind of very much from the perspective of different friction points, we realized that we could use protobuf records in place of the JSON-Ls for loading our data in. Right? So we have tons and tons and tons of records, and we realized we can go much faster if we use sort of pre-digested protobuf things. And then all of a sudden we're worrying about network latency between us and wherever exactly Amazon's AWS thing is, or Google's thing, or whatever we're using at the time. And it's really getting down to the level what's the amount of time it takes a bit of information to move from our hard drive to our CPU to across the wire to their CPU to their GPU, compute, down, right? And once I was thinking about the system on that incredibly nitty-gritty level, I realized that I was going to have a job for a long time.
So this is this crazy question. What's your prediction on when singularity would happen? Give one or two reasons, maybe a year or a year.
Yeah, none of us want to touch that.
I guess in an effort to give any answer at all, I would say that what I think Bill Gates said that people always overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And actually, I'll just leave it there. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, another question over here.
Kind of to your sort of point about, hey, you really love the modeling part of the data, but not so much the deployment or your ingestion portion. As you think about specialization, right? How do you ensure that, yes, you're doing the parts that you love and somebody else is doing the parts that they love, but that you guys can still work and collaborate together, that you're building something that can be deployed, right? Especially in a scenario where maybe building something offline is great, you can run it, you run it one time, but it has to be run in a dynamic situation and just consuming data that you're, as a data scientist, thinking about that as part of building your model.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. That's such a good question. The way that you deal with that, I think, is that you collaborate with those teams closely from the beginning. You can't be at all into each other's stand-ups, right? Like, you can't be in 5 stand-ups today. But you have these checkpoints where you do talk to each other about what are the challenges. You consult at the beginning of the project and all throughout the project. I think that maybe there was this temptation before of, and maybe some companies still have this, where data scientists work on a model and then they like lob it over the wall to the engineers, and the engineers are like, yeah, and that's not a good system. No one likes, well, the data scientist might be oblivious, but like the rest of the company is not happy with that. And it makes the models not as good too, because you don't know, like you might build a model that doesn't work as fast, and then you realize that's not going to work on a website because no one wants to wait 10 seconds for your result. Having just communication involved and becomes, I think, is helpful.
One of the steps that we like to skip over a lot, but is one of the most critical, is that planning phase of any project. And it's the most boring, it could be the most time consuming, the documentation, the writing out the different scenarios, but then also making sure that you get that input from the different stakeholders. I was a product manager for about a decade, worked with epidemiologists, software engineers, UX, stakeholders, academics. None of them agreed. And my sole job was to get them all on the same page about the output. And it's tough, and it takes a long time. It's where you want to give up, but that's the most critical piece to ensuring, to your point, that these different teams are working together towards the same goal with the same expectation and understanding. It's that planning part, it's the worst part, but it's the most important part.
I'll just give a +1 to product managers. It's everyone's responsibility, but product managers are the ones that, the buck stops there.
Any other questions? Thank you guys for being here. You've spoken a lot about machine learning as automation of prediction. But I'd like to get your thoughts on what happens when you turn the process around and instead start generating content. And I'm particularly fearful of this because if you have a thing that can understand what it means deeply to be in one class or another, you can use that same thing to generate things that are indistinguishable to humans in that class. So, for instance, you could generate a video of Donald Trump declaring war on North Korea, distribute that in an era when less and less resources are dedicated to investigative journalism. That can propagate and cause mass destruction on a time scale that I don't see many systems in place to deal with. How do you, as pioneers of the AI machine learning front, think about generative processes and what can you do to assuage my fears?
So I think there's a pessimism gradient. Yeah, go for it.
You should be afraid. No, it already exists. We know it already exists. We know that the AI is already creating content. I used to also work in a PR agency of all places, and it's so easy now for AI to just spin up an article about something completely, simple that we don't even really think about. You don't realize that it's actually written by a machine. And so I think my personal opinion is that you still have to have those checks and balances. So yeah, you can have a machine churn out 100 articles a day because you don't have the staff, but you still need that person who's the gatekeeper to say, this one is on brand for us, this one is accurate, you still can fact check it, so I think that's where sort of we're talking about there's still going to be a role for humans because you have to apply that critical thinking and human judgment to say, okay, this is actually something that we can push out responsibly and ethically. And I'm not saying that all companies do it. A lot of companies don't do it. This is just my opinion of how it should work. Perhaps it's a naive opinion, and I understand that, but it's how we operate in our company. We use a lot of AI to create a lot of our content, but we need to make sure that it's done responsibly. So you should be afraid, and I can assuage your fears with that because it is already happening. You know, that's how a lot of people, like their families got torn apart with the last election because of Facebook, because of what Facebook was showing, depending on your interests, depending on the type of people you follow, what you interact with, and you started to only see the things that fell into that bucket. You didn't get that broad spectrum of content that sort of showed both sides of it. So it is a scary thing. And it goes back to that, it's your responsibility to be aware and educate yourself on it, you know, but it is also the shared responsibility of these companies to be doing it responsibly and ethically, and unfortunately, we have no control over that. We only have control over ourselves.
Yeah, with these deep fakes that we've seen and are out there, I think our days of, oh, that's a shop, I can tell by the pixels, are definitely over. I think that a lot of it is, you know, I think that those of us who have grown up on the internet are more discerning, and we know to be very careful of sources, but people who haven't aren't as careful, and I would say probably also, even those of us who have grown up on the internet, not enough of us are careful about sources. You know, I think that part of it's on us as the people who are making these models to take that time, slow down, take that time to educate people so that they can be more discerning. And then I think it's also more along the lines of cybersecurity where, you know, it becomes more about a circle of trust. You know, do you have, you know, news or media that you follow that you can trust? When I see an article, I should immediately question, is this a reliable source? Is this a spoof of a reliable source? You know, it's unfortunate that that's kind of the way that we're going. I'd like a more, now I'm pessimistic, I'd like a more optimistic sort of approach than just be like paranoid or something. But yeah, educating each other on what kinds of things and asking, you know, having more critical thinking. Does this make sense? You know, unfortunately, sometimes things are a little chaotic, and so it could be, well, maybe it does, you know, these wacky Twitter tweets in the morning, like, who knows? Trying to be a little bit careful. But yeah, just take a discerning eye, and then those of us who are in this field should take the responsibility to try to educate people more.
All right, I'll do my very best. I'm going to do my very best to be optimistic here. I think the best thing, okay, the one thing that's worth remembering is that kind of in the early days of computers, you had like these 18-year-olds, probably 16-year-olds, whatever, hacking into the Department of Defense computers in the middle of the Cold War. And by all accounts, we as a species should not have survived that like lack of security, you know, over-trusting, et cetera, so trying to draw a really loose analogy, maybe although ridiculous things will happen, we will survive it too. I think that the counter-argument to that is that things move much faster now. So maybe the best optimistic case I can make is that although it's a tragedy when a lot of people are misled for a matter of hours or even days, or in some cases weeks or years or months, whatever, including overlapping a critical decision-making point in the democratic process. To some extent, the people that tend to get really worked up about these things tend to already be leaning in one direction or another, right? People, confirmation bias, etc. So I guess my hope, and it is, I say this really less as a data science specialist and more just as a private citizen who's trying my best to stay hopeful, is that although it will be bad, there will be pain, there will be loss, it will be just one of the many things that are not at this point.
We take one or two more questions if anyone has it.
So one of the common themes that a lot of these questions center around is the data governance and its role with AI. So I'm curious, you know, two of you guys work for highly regulated industries. How present do you guys have like data governance councils that in some way, shape, or form monitor the algorithms you generate and evaluate like how you guys are operating, which are is some compliance with commission and ensuring that agencies acceptably and I guess, yeah, like to kind of take from there, like what is your interaction with these guardrails that should be in place at the enterprise level?
Yeah, we have many different auditing departments, and we are regularly auditing all of our models. We have both data science models, but then we also have actuarial models. So we have a lot of different kinds of models for our data. And yeah, like, so we have these experts who know the regulations, and also who abide by our own internal more stringent regulations for how we're handling the data, the fairness of our models, the transparency of our models, how we're tracking changes, and how we're preventing evildoers or whatever from coming in. And what if someone were to come in and change the model object or something and have it, wreak havoc that way or something. We have dedicated teams who are thinking about all the ways that things could go wrong and making sure that we don't. And so we just give them as much information as we can, and then they tell us, oh, you need to change these things, and then we do it. And yeah, it's kind of amazing how much of the business is based on that, but it's really important.
Yeah, I think, and I obviously can't go into all the details, but we and your organization as well have been dealing with data for a long time. What's new is the exact models, and we do have some processes to deal with the new challenges that provides or creates. But we, like every organization in this space, have reams of regulation and auditing around just how we manage the data. And to a large extent, our specific workflows fit into those well-established practices that everyone in the company is well-trained in.
Unfortunately, marketing is still the Wild West, and there are no standards. There should be, but I think we're getting to a point where it's needed. I can't go into too many details, but we were recently working on a legal case with a company who had been misreporting some of their data to their investors because there's no standardization for how the data is collected, how it's reported. And so while not life or death, it does, play into a lot of money. So for some people that is life or death. So, there's a need for data governance in any industry that really collects data to make sure that they're doing it in a standardized, responsible way. Unfortunately, for marketing, we just don't have it, but it's desperately needed.
I'll also give a shout out to culture. So having a company culture of openness, honesty, transparency, a blameless culture so that people aren't incentivized to hide something that they've done. I think all of those things can really go towards this kind of issue.
We have one more question. Well, hey, I think that concludes our panel for this evening. I'd like to thank all of our speakers tonight for being here. Thank you so much. And we have about 15 minutes.
Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.